Men of Carthage. They need to respect us. This is unacceptable. They vie for control of the Mediterranean. We control the trade routes, and they dare challenge our rule. These people are in the infantile stages. It is best to stop them before they grow. Does any among us not understand the danger that is Rome? They are impetuous, a peninsula of crooks and thieves, masquerading as civilized. If they continue to interfere, we have no choice but to end these Roman dogs. Trust me, good people of Carthage, they look upon our wealth with envy in their hearts. I ask you, brothers, to think. They steal our money. They steal our territory. What recourse do we have against a foe so evil? We must stand as one. Merchants lose valuable trade to the ever growing Romans. While now they remain a small peninsula, did they not break the Etruscans easily? Now seek that which belongs to us. If we do not stop this brazen aggression, what will be the end? My dear friends, think on Masana. We cannot let this go unpunished, lest they believe us weak and ripe for the taking. It is time to end these aggressors. I understand many of you are afraid. I must remind you, they have no navy. We and we alone rule the sea. This further proves the brazenness of these thugs. They have even bullied Syracuse into alliance. Do you believe their cunning? It is no opinion that they seek our wealth. It is no opinion that they seek what is ours. So, sirs, I ask you for support in crushing the Roman threat. My fellow Romans, we are here today to discuss our future. What you fail to understand is that with Carthage around, we have no future. They own the trade routes. Roman trade is beholden to these tyrants. Their greed knows no bounds. They would see us starve. Our desire to live is impeded. Now think in earnest. Do they have friendship on their minds? Did we all forget Massana? Need I mention Corsica and Sardinia are being flooded with punic influence? I wish, good people of Rome, to tell you they are our ally, or that they mean no harm. However, we needn't look any further than the Iberian Peninsula. They continue to expand all around us. We Romans watch their encroachment every day. Does anyone think honestly they will stop after control of Sicily? They are expanding every which way towards us. The walls are closing in. Now is the time to strike. For if we delay any longer, we will all awake slaves of the Punic. What was the truth of the First Punic War? What actually led to these two giants going to war? Naturally, you had two vastly expanding powers that inevitably were going to collide and force one to become the dominant power throughout history and one be largely forgotten. The First Punic War started for a multitude of reasons. Territorial disputes had a large part to play in the First Punic War. The main war goal of the First Punic War was the conquest of Sicily. However, the expansion of Carthage into Hispania, present day Spain, was a large factor in getting the Roman war effort going. Naturally, like every war, economic gain was at the forefront. Whoever controlled the Mediterranean controlled the trade routes. The First Punic War started over a small conflict involving mercenaries in the Sicilian city of Sana. Rome, through victory, gets an alliance with Syracuse. However, shortly after, they are beat back in most naval battles at the start of the war by Carthage. Some years later, a gentleman by the name of Marcus Atilius Regulus lands in Africa. The Carthaginian people, at this point, were ready to surrender. However, due to alleged harsh conditions, the Carthaginians refused to surrender. That there is, as far as I know, no accurate representation of what the actual conditions to surrender were. It is only stated in primary sources that they were harsh. Many can speculate on what these conditions were. One thing we cannot speculate on is that the Carthaginians outright refused to surrender. And, after catching Regulus off guard on a muddy day, beat his forces, surrounded him, and captured him. Regulus was later sent to Rome to talk the Romans into surrendering, at which point he promptly refused and, while there, just told them to continue on fighting. Once Regulus returned to Carthage, he was executed. After Regulus was captured, there is a modicum of success for the Romans in Sicily. Eventually, it does turn into a stalemate. General Hamilcar Barca wages guerrilla warfare against the Romans. He does an incredible job of stalemating them in Sicily. However, no matter how good Hamilcar was at guerrilla warfare, Roman industry was not going to be stopped. Private citizens took it upon themselves to fund the making of a new fleet. This directly led the Romans dominating the Mediterranean, and eventually, after crushing the Carthaginian navy, they would receive the Lipari Islands and Sicily, thus ending the First Punic War. What we're interested in here is why the war started, what led to the Romans winning, and of course, who was justified in this war. To explain the levels a little bit, we have mandate of heaven, which means that God wills it, completely, totally, and utterly justified. Of course, right below that we have justified, which just is a step down from mandate of heaven. It's basically your opposition here would have to be completely evil. Here, you would just need to be morally justified. Fair enough. Of course, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Fair enough. You did what any reasonable humans would do. Watch it play out. It means we're teetering on the edge. We're like Icarus right now. We might just go into the unjust category. Unjust naturally means these were unjust actions, and you have full culpability for your actions. And finally, mandate of hell, which is essentially a demonic influence, completely and utterly evil actions that are not defendable and not acceptable in any way. So, with those rules being established, if we had to place the Roman Republic in the First Punic War's actions, I would have to place them in fair enough. When you boil it down, their economy was being impacted by Carthage dominating the trade routes. On top of that, Carthage was the only other superpower, was the biggest superpower of the time that was rapidly expanding throughout Hispania and now had set its sights on Sicily. And mainly, seeing as Carthage responded first to the crisis in Sicily, siding with mercenaries, we'll give Rome fair enough position in this war. When it comes to Carthage, it feels right to put them at fair enough also just below Rome, but because they were a larger superpower who essentially instigated this war, I'm going to put it in watch it play. The next event we're going to talk about is Marcus Attilius Regulus, and this is just a general overview of his character. This is a man who was consul, landed, beached, and started an assault and siege on Carthage itself. Unfortunately, some say there's mixed accounts, but allegedly the conditions he proposed for surrender were too harsh, and that led ultimately to his capture and defeat, at which point he was sent back to Rome, where he was urged by the Carthaginians to advocate for the surrender of the Romans, at which point he did not listen to any of those wishes and convinced his countrymen to further take up arms against a weakened Carthage. And inevitably, he was sent back to Carthage. Willingly, he went back to Carthage and was eventually executed for his crimes against Carthage. As far as the actions of Attilius Regulus, because we have no actual record of the so-called surrender conditions, I feel as though in his life it is fair enough to say that he was justified in his actions as consul of Rome. I do not think that he did anything untoward. I think when he went to Rome and advocated for Rome to keep fighting, I think he stood by the principles of protecting his nation and honorably still went back to Carthage and faced his fate. I'm going to give his overall life and culpability in the war a justified rating. Now, on this flank, we'll have the Carthaginian treatment of Marcus Attilius Regulus. And I think many would say that the so-called murder, but rather execution in reality, of Marcus Attilius Regulus would fall in the unjust category, some might think. Some might imagine it belongs in watch it play, and some might think it belongs in fair enough. I am going to put it into the justified category, even though I think Marcus Attilius Regulus was a justified leader, and I think his actions themselves were justified. I do not think that the Carthaginian people were overstepping their bounds and executing a direct threat to them that threatened the very capital. In reality, this was a man, a foreign enemy, who was captured miles from the capital city, and through his aggression and harsh conditions, it would appear to me that the Carthaginian people were justified in their execution of Marcus Attilius Regulus.